She looked like someone's neighbor, someone's colleague, someone completely ordinary who worked at a bank and did gymnastics in her spare time. But between 1984 and 2003, she destroyed every man who loved her. Her name is Dena Thompson. She was born in 1960 in North London. This is her story, and the ending is going to make your blood boil. Dena's first husband was a man named Wyatt. She married him in October 1984. Within months, she had forged documents, emptied his bank accounts, and genuinely convinced him, that the mafia was hunting them both and that he needed to go into hiding. He believed her. He went on the run. He spent years of his life as a fugitive from a threat that didn't exist, while she carried on with her life as if he never existed. Wyatt later described her as someone who had made him completely lose his mind. He trusted her with everything. She used that trust to destroy him. But Dena didn't stop there. In 1991, while she was still legally married to Wyatt, Dena met a man named Julian Webb. He was a media sales executive, warm, trusting, completely taken in by her. She told him she had cancer. She told him she needed his savings for treatment. He gave her everything. They married at Chichester Registry Office. What Julian didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the marriage was bigamous. It wasn't even legal. She was still Mrs. Wyatt. For 3 years, Julian lived with a woman he believed was his wife, a woman he loved, a woman who was quietly, methodically planning to kill him. On the 14th of June 1994, it was Julian Webb's 31st birthday. Dena made him his favorite meal, a curry. She sat with him while he ate it. What Julian didn't know was that she had crushed antidepressants into that curry. She had also been lacing his drinks with ground aspirin over a period of time before that night. Julian Webb died in his own home, on his birthday, poisoned by the woman he thought was his wife. And what did Dena do the very next morning? She went to his workplace and asked how quickly she could claim his £36,000 death benefit. The company refused to release the money. Julian's mother, Rosemary Webb, a woman who had never trusted Dena, not for a single day, told them the truth. That Dena was still married to someone else, that she wasn't even Julian's legal next of kin. Dena then pressured Rosemary to have Julian cremated. Rosemary refused. She buried her son in a plot near her home. That decision would become the most important thing anyone did in this entire case. An inquest into Julian's death returned an open verdict. The coroner couldn't determine exactly what had happened. There wasn't enough evidence at the time to push further. Dena walked away. She moved on. In 1998, she married again. A man named Richard Thompson. She took his surname. She told him she had won £300,000 on the national lottery. He believed her. She emptied his accounts, stole his money, and eventually, when he found out the truth, she decided to kill him too. On the 1st of January 2000, Dena asked Richard if she could tie him up and blindfold him. She told him it was a game. Once he was bound, gagged, and completely defenseless, she walked back into the room carrying a baseball bat and a carving knife. She attacked him. Richard Thompson managed to fight back. He freed his hands. Despite bleeding heavily from his head, he managed to force her to drop the knife. And in that moment, she looked at him and said, "And I want you to hear this." She said, "It's all been a lie. I've spent all your money." Then she walked out of the house. Richard Thompson described what happened to him on the BBC programme Crime Watch Solved in 2009. He said, "I cannot believe what has just happened. This woman has turned into some kind of monster. There was no indication whatsoever until a few minutes previously." Police arrested Dena Thompson. She went to trial for the attempted murder of Richard Thompson. She stood in court and told the jury that Richard had attacked her, that the bondage session had gone wrong, that she had acted in self-defense. The jury believed her. She was acquitted of attempted murder. She was, however, convicted of 15 counts of fraud and deception for the money she had stolen from Richard and 2 other men. She was sentenced to 3 years and 9 months. But here is where the story changes. Because while she was being investigated, the detectives looking into her grew suspicious. They started asking questions about Julian Webb, about how he died, about the open verdict, about the fact that this woman had tried to kill one husband and had mysteriously lost another. They went to Rosemary Webb, Julian's mother, the woman who had refused to cremate her son, the woman who had buried him. They asked if they could exhume the body. Rosemary said yes. In 2001, Julian Webb's remains were dug up from that grave on Hayling Island, 7 years after his death. A new autopsy was carried out, and this time, with better technology and a clearer question to answer, the results were devastating. The levels of antidepressants found in Julian's body were far higher than had been detected the first time. High enough that there was no possibility he had taken them himself. This was not a suicide. This was not an accident. This was murder. Dena Thompson was charged with the murder of Julian Webb. In 2003, after a 5-week trial at Lewis Crown Court, Dena Thompson was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge described her as utterly ruthless and without pity. The lead detective on the case, Detective Chief Inspector Martin Underhill, stood outside the court and said, "This woman is every man's nightmare, the most dangerous woman I have ever met. For a decade, she targeted men sexually, financially, and physically." Another detective described her as one of the most fluent liars they had ever come across. And then came the revelation that showed the full, terrifying scope of what she may have done. After her conviction, police launched a wider investigation into her past. They found something that had been buried even deeper than Julian Webb. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Dena had been making regular visits to Bulgaria. She had a boyfriend there, a young man in his 20s named Stoyan Kostov. And at some point around 1980, Stoyan Kostov vanished. He was never seen again. No body was ever found. Sussex police relaunched an investigation in 2010 with the assistance of Interpol, explicitly suspecting that Dena had killed him too. No charges were ever filed. There was not enough evidence. There may also have been a man in Leeds, an unnamed partner she had in the mid-1980s, who died unexpectedly. Detectives expressed concern that there could be additional victims that nobody ever identified. Men who died quietly. Men whose deaths were never connected to a woman using a different name in a different county. Dena Thompson served 19 years of her life sentence. In May 2022, the parole board recommended her release on license. The Justice Secretary approved it. Surviving victims objected. Former detectives objected. The public was furious. She walked out of prison in June 2022. She is living somewhere in England right now. Her exact location has not been publicly disclosed. She is subject to conditions: an electronic tag, a curfew, a ban from living in southwest England, lifetime supervision by the probation service, and a requirement to disclose any new relationships. One of the factors the parole board noted in support of releasing her was the financial backing she had built up from the sale of her artwork while in prison. She had been painting, selling her work, building savings. Shortly after her release, she was photographed outside a Poundland, smirking. Richard Thompson, the husband she tried to beat to death with a bat on New Year's Day, was asked for his response when told she was free. He said, "She'll get karma." As of today, the murder of Stoyan Kostov remains unsolved. The suspicious death of the unnamed man in Leeds has never been formally investigated to a conclusion. The deaths of all the men police feared may have crossed her path in the 1980s and 1990s, men nobody ever connected to her, remain open questions. Dena Thompson was convicted of 1 murder, suspected of at least 2 more, acquitted of attempted murder, convicted of 15 counts of fraud against the men she married and the men she targeted. And she is free. The judge called her utterly ruthless and without pity. She's out here, right now, somewhere in England, and nobody is telling you where.